Okay, we're live now. You can start. Can all the audience please mute their microphone? Thank you. Mitali, you can start.
Hello everyone, I am Mitali Garg. I'm a final year student at KMC Mangalore, India, and I welcome you all to this panel discussion. Thank you for being here. It's a panel discussion organized by the Women's Health team at Students Against COVID, about Students Against COVID. We are a student-led organization consisting of students from 63 plus countries striving to brainstorm ideas to help in this pandemic and empower our students community, all the while championing scientific. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our esteemed panel. Firstly, we have Miss Annabelle Mackenzie. She's a hospital-based IBCLC lactation consultant. She has previously worked as a UNICEF friendly lead at Suffolk County Council. Currently, she's responsible for lactation consultancy throughout the hospital. She has created a breastfeeding alliance, created training programs for parents and the staff, co-created and colostrum protection service for diabetic and other patients, and contributed to a new guidance document on lactation in the defense of diabetic. It's an honor to have you here, ma'am. Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Robin Miller. She is a TV personality, food writer, and a nutritionist. She has a master's degree in food and nutrition from New York University. She has authored numerous books, including the New York Times bestseller Quick Fix Meals. Her popular show, Quick Fix Meals with Robin Miller, aired on the Food Network for 5 years. Her food cover story regularly appears in the Arizona Republic, USA Today Food, and more. Presently, she appears on the local network and cable television. Apart from having a blog and a website of thousands of recipes, she also has a YouTube page where you can find dozens of recipes or video tutorials. I think it's safe to say that Ms. Miller has a lot on her plate. It's a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Maulik Shah, a pediatrician currently working as an associate professor at MP Government Medical College, Gujarat. In addition to his academic and clinical excellence, especially in the field of neonatology, he loves to cultivate his passion for oration, film direction, and photography by preparing IEC materials concerning health and welfare for the maximum benefit of the society, having won multiple awards for the same. An author, owner of a website, YouTube, and a TV show, first of their kind, in the regional language of Gujarati. It's truly an honor to have you here, sir. Thank you. Last but not the least, I would like to introduce our wonderful moderators for this session. I'm a medical student at Government Medical College, Amritsar, an aspiring oncologist who strives to work towards betterment of the society and upliftment of the marginal section of the society. Next, we have Ria Raj, a first-year medical student at St. George's University, Granada. Her keen interests lie in transplant surgery, health equity, global surgery, and advocacy for women's health. Not taking much of your time, I would like to give it over to Sabi. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure.
Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mitali. Breastfeeding is the practice of feeding and nursing infants and young children with breast milk. It is one of the most effective ways to ensure child's health and survival. Along with providing all the energy and nutrients that an infant needs, it also contains various antibodies which protect the child from diarrhea, respiratory tract infections, obesity, diabetes. According to UNICEF and WHO data, infants younger than 6 months of age who are not breastfed are 3 to 4 times more likely to die than those who are breastfed. It is also beneficial from mothers also, as it protects her from breast and ovarian cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Despite being the ideal food for infants, globally only 40% of infants under 6 months of age are breastfed exclusively. According to WHO, if breastfeeding was scaled up to near universal levels, about 823,000 annual deaths in children under 5 years of age can be prevented. Therefore, it is imperative to encourage and support mothers to breastfeed their children. With that aim, we have organized our panel discussion. It consists of 2 rounds in which 3 questions will be asked from each of our panelists. followed by round 3, which will be an audience round. So I humbly request all the attendees to type their questions in the chat box. Now, without further ado, I request Ria to take over and start with round number 1.
Okay, so I will thank you. Can everyone in the audience please mute their microphones? There is some background noise. Okay. Thank you, Savi. I'm going to start off by asking the first question to Dr. Maulik. Thank you for being here with us. Could you please tell us about breastfeeding practices in your region or any harmful cultural practices, if there are any?
Well, thank you very much for taking me for this panel discussion. I would like to tell that in our region, it's more or less all or none law. If a patient accepts to do a breastfeeding, generally mothers in our region do fulfill their promises, but it is very sad that up till now what we have encountered is nearly 60% of mother continue to have breastfeeding exclusively for first 6 months of life, and then gradually they wean off the baby to other complementary feeding. And many of these 40% remaining who are not fulfilling the promise of breastfeeding for first 6 months of life are often end up with many problems in the newborn and their infants, and we have to encounter them by admitting them to our units and treating them. Harmful practices, one thing I would like to specifically highlight here is that in Indian subcontinent, usually there is a tradition called pre-lactal feed offering. So every particular newborn who has just born been given either the honey or the molasses water or a sugar water with a spoon, and this has been a culture or a tradition in Indian continent, specifically thinking that whosoever gives this prelactal feed might lead to good quality development in that particular newborn. And that's the age-old belief which leads to problems. We are usually concerned because of the two reasons associated with this. Number one, since it has been made with improper hygiene, the chances of getting infections to newborn are very high. Second thing, it leads to reduction in the prolactin and oxytocin cycle development, because you and I know that the newborns are usually very active in first 2 hours of life. And when you are feeding them with prelactal feeds, this baby is satiated very easily, and then they have not that enthusiasm or eager to latch to the breast of mom, and ultimately it leads to suppression of the starting of the hormonal reflexes of oxytocin and prolactin. So breastfeeding in a natural way gets delayed, and often it leads to mothers to believe that they are not secreting enough for their newborns, and that leads to a lot of other issues, like vicious cycle starts with mom thinking that there is not enough milk coming. She feeds the baby with the other animals milk, and ultimately the baby lands up with septicemia and many other issues. So prelactal feeds are most harmful to our babies in our continent, and that's one of the rituals. Second harmful rituals in our area specifically concerned is people consider that the early days colostrum, which is usually a yellow colored milk and little bit thicker in consistency, is considered to be a witch's milk in our area, and people do not feed the children those colostrum, and they often throw away that valuable milk, which is actually containing the most immunological factors, and we consider it as a first vaccine of the child. So these are the two most harmful practices related to breast feeding we have observed. And there is a common misbelief that in summer months babies might be thirsty, so mothers tend to feed these babies with the water available in the home, and that leads to often the unhygienic condition going to baby, and babies getting infected, getting diarrhea and many other things. So these are the common harmful practices which I have observed during my practices.
Thank you for that very detailed answer, Dr. Maulik. The next question is, when should a mother avoid breastfeeding? Are there any conditions or diseases that the mother has, or if she's on any specific medication, when should mothers avoid breastfeeding?
Is it a question to me?
Yes.
Okay. So by and large, what we have seen in the Asian subcontinents where we have, okay, and Asian subcontinent and usually the developing countries, what we have observed is that there are two options only for moms. Either they have to breastfeed the child, or they can utilize the animal milk or other substitutes available in the particular market. Most often these are not affordable, most often they are not culturally acceptable, and hence most often when you say no to breastfeeding, they tend to do a lot of mischiefs what are because of the ignorance and lack of knowledge, that they tend to go to animal milk, often in the improper dilution and improperly made to have for the babies. So there are issues with babies. So what in Indian and Asian subcontinent people believe is that usually using breast milk is the most important thing to prevent diarrheal diseases and infectious diseases in this part of the world, from which the babies die more often as compared to the other infectious disease for which we contraindicate breastfeeding, like HIV or any other diseases for which the breastfeeding might have been contraindicated. Medications usually, if the mother is not on the cancer or chemotherapy regimens, or if she is not on any anti-thyroid medications, usually there are not much enough drugs available which might be contraindicated, except antipsychotic medications which may transmit through breast milk to the baby, and babies might develop symptoms, side effect of those particular drugs. So apart from these 2-3 drug groups, broadly speaking, there are not much of contraindications usually associated with these drugs. More often we are worried about the infectious disease. So whenever we offer them, whenever you find that this is affordable, this is acceptable culturally, and it can be sustained for first 6 months of life without breaking in between. What happens naturally is, if they are not affording, they will initially say yes, but after 1 month that particular option will be changed over by another, and then you are land up with the evils of both the part. So that's the problem here.
Hi, that's a fantastic, very complete answer. But I just wanted to add to what the doctor said, just to kind of clarify. So, you know, some of you are medical students and you're kind of like wondering, well, where do we find out which medications are okay, blah, 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 you know, because everything's always evolving. So, you know, there's some really good references, and hopefully we'll be able to send you the references that we can add to the YouTube, you know, when it's going to be online, or to the Facebook. You know, places like Thomas Hale, Breastfeeding and Medications, that's a book that comes out annually or every couple of years. It's updated. There's also websites, there's various websites in the UK, like UK DILAS, and so on. So we have, you know, and lots of countries have their own. I'm sure you, Doctor, you probably have your own in your country as well.
Absolutely, Annabelle. Thank you very much for adding those things. I would like to tell all the students that there is a particular website made in USA usually. It's called LactMed. LactMed usually suggests us, it has also the Android and iOS applications also. If you put up the name of the drug, it usually tells up what are the evidences of this getting transferred via breast milk. So you come to know that this particular drug taken by mom, how much the chances of this getting affecting the baby. So LactMed is one of the resource which you can utilize. It has been on the website also, and it has also been available as iOS and Android app.
And I think, I'm hoping that LactMed is going to come back online, and the app has been suspended for a while, but the website is still live, if you Google it.
Yes, app has got a little jerks in between, but website really works well.
And the other thing I was going to say as well, in relation to what the doctor said, was about HIV. So we've come to learn a lot about HIV and breastfeeding over the past 10 years. And you can correct me if I get the terminology wrong here, doctor, but, you know, fundamentally, if we have the correct treatment in place, and the correct measures are taken, you know, obviously you need to see a specialist, etc., in relation to this, but fundamentally, we do say now, if the viral load is low enough, and with the modern medications in some countries that's possible, then it is possible to breastfeed, and it's actually a safer option in some cases.
Ultimately, you have to measure the pros and cons of both the sides. If the patient cannot afford, if he cannot sustain, or if it is culturally not acceptable by that particular family, then you have to rely on the decision made by the family, and that's usually either breastfeeding or usually formula feeding. Most often our patients do not afford formula feeding or not able to sustain those things, so they usually tend up to get breast feeding option.
Thank you, Dr. Maulik and Annabelle. Over to Savi now to ask the next question.
Okay, so the next question is for Robin Miller, ma'am. Can you please tell us about the breastfeeding
Savi?
practices? Yeah.
Sorry,
Hello?
Yeah, we couldn't hear you.
Okay. Next question to Robin, ma'am. Ma'am, can you please tell us about the breastfeeding practices in your region, and if there are any harmful practices associated with it?
Thank you, first of all, for having me here. How's my sound? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's perfect, ma'am.
Okay, good. So in the United States, from the research that I did for this panel discussion, 80 to 85% of American women try breastfeeding. They at least try, they want to, knowing that it's the best for the baby. 50% of the women that try by 6 months have given up. So I found that discouraging. The average American woman makes it about 17 weeks, which means some stop earlier and some a little longer, but that's just 4 months. And so considering really the introduction of solid foods should happen between 4 and 6, I feel like there's probably a gap there in terms of nutrition. So that's the research I found for American women, and I don't know if it's lifestyle. You know, a lot of American women work and they go back to work, and I think that probably has a lot to do with it. In terms of practices, I'm not an expert in this area, but I do think that many women in this country will put, they give their best effort for those first few months, and then it's back to work, and they supplement with formula. Even I think that they don't even pump, if they're going back to work, and they leave their own milk at home. I think that's also something that, in my experience, has not been something that women choose to do. Of course, now women are home. So, perhaps those numbers will change, and for the health of the baby, maybe these numbers for 2020 will change. Women are home with their babies, and perhaps they're lasting long. That would be good news.
Yeah, we hope so. And
Yeah.
the next question is, are there any specific foods which a breastfeeding mother should take?
Yes. If you look at the kind of foods that we should be eating anyway for a healthy diet, whether we're breastfeeding or not, these are pretty much all the same foods. A woman's caloric intake, she's going to be hungry, she's burning more calories every day. So foods that are nutrient dense, so more nutrients per calorie. So things like avocados are super satisfying and healthy fats, and nuts and seeds are rich in protein and calcium and iron and zinc and all the things that babies need. And these include chia seeds and flax seeds and hemp seeds, almonds, and the wonderful nuts. Beans and legumes, for the same reason. Chickpeas have been known for centuries to help with the production of breast milk. They call them galactagogues. So they help with milk production. So chickpeas have been known to be great food for breastfeeding moms. And dark leafy green vegetables, kind of all the things that I would tell you to eat anyway, are great for moms. And the one great thing about incorporating all these foods while you're breastfeeding is that you are creating a healthy lifestyle, so that when you are introducing solids, dark green leafy vegetables and nuts and seeds, and all those are already part of your regular menu, the baby's already been exposed to that, and you just continue on down that path. Annabelle, did you have a question or a comment? I saw you waving your hand.
Yes, I did. I think Dr. Maulik raised your hand before me, though, didn't you?
Okay, thank you so much. What
Okay.
I just okay, Robin was really explaining very nice, and I agree with the things. Usually, when patients ask us such questions, we usually have a one-liner for that. That we tell them that whatever you can cook at home, and whatever is made by God, are easily acceptable food for everyone.
Yeah.
So that
I think,
Oh,
Uh, Sir, your voice is breaking. Can you please repeat?
that was for the doctor, correct? Or for me?
okay, well, while we're waiting for his sound to come back, can I just interject that I thought that I
Yes,
sort
ma'am,
of
please.
disagree with a lot of that, and I like Dr. Maulik Shah's phrase there, that basically anything we have, you know, just to make it as simple, you know, postpartum for families is a really is generally quite a stressful period. There's a lot going on. They've just become parents for the first time, so it's great to have a really varied diet, but at the same time, if we don't have all these things, that it doesn't mean that we can't breastfeed. And that people worry a lot about, you know, having the perfect diet, et cetera, and it kind of can act as a barrier to breastfeeding, because people believe, because of marketing claims, unfortunately, that if they don't have a fantastic diet, you know, they think that, okay, well then I better give formula, you know, because it will have more calories or something like that. And that's not true. You know, basically, you know, the mechanism for production of breast milk is, you know, uses the woman's body, you know, or the breastfeeding person's body, in the first, you know, in the first instance. And so really, you know, what we're eating, great, that will add micronutrients or, you know, those kinds of things. But fundamentally, it's not, you know, if we don't have a fantastic variety or quantity of food, we can still make breast milk. And in starvation situations, we still continue to make breast milk, or in war situations. It's harder, certainly, but.
Yes, very true.
Two things that I always tell people when I'm counseling and discussing breastfeeding. Two important things I try to mention, because Annabelle, you're right, is just to try to stay as close to the original form of the food, for example. So if it's a potato, it's a potato, it's not French fries. So the closer you can get to the way nature intended, it's also more affordable that way too. So if you're just having vegetables and pastas and grains and beans, super affordable. And also, to your point, was the baby will get what it needs from the breast milk. No matter what you're eating, the baby will get what it needs. It's still better. It's a better option, always. There's always enough nutrition in there, as long as it's coming from mom.
Yes. Okay, so we move on to our next question. Are there any foods which the breastfeeding mother should avoid?
Yeah, and this is for me. Is this for me?
Yes, yes. Oh, yeah.
Number one, and this was something that's been, you know, for a long time, is seafood, fish, because of the mercury levels, which can be, can cause developmental delays in the baby, and issues. So avoiding seafood, raw, cooked, anything for the first, you know, while you're breastfeeding is huge. Alcohol, I mean, studies have been out for years, and you still see breastfeeding moms drinking sometimes, but any little bit of alcohol stays in your body for hours. So the advice is to have no alcohol, and if you do, to at least wait several hours to let it process before you breastfeed. I know Annabelle has another question. Same is true with caffeine. Avoiding caffeine, or in moderation. And herbal supplements, which are not, you know, in the US, they're not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. So you really don't know what's in an herbal supplement. So it's just risky. And any medications you're on, you should just always speak to your doctor first, tell them that you're breastfeeding, and check with that. But those are kind of the main ones that I like to mention.
Okay, thank you. Very well explained. Now, I would like to invite Ria to continue the answer.
Sorry, Annabelle wanted to say something.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to interject. What we tend to say in lactation circles is that the difficulty with advising no alcohol at all is that it's not really the same as during pregnancy. You know, during pregnancy, alcohol goes through the placenta. You know, and that's a fetal alcohol syndrome is a well-known issue, but in terms of breastfeeding, it's a bit more complex because, well, first of all, you know, there's a kind of social context. And so if we say to them, no drinking at all, it doesn't really give them the information to do it potentially, you know, safely. So, you know, there's a pediatrician in Canada, Dr. Jack Newman, who talks a lot about this and says, you know, the occasional glass of wine, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, you know, the safe guidance would be, you know, with a meal and wait a few hours between, you know, having, you know, so breastfeed, then have a meal, have a glass of wine or whatever, but then wait a few hours, you know. And so, you know, if somebody, because the thing is that people will do it, you know, that's the thing. It's, you know, the just say no days are kind of gone, aren't they? So, you know, and then the other thing about the seafood, I think that's really interesting because somebody came to me with a similar query this week. And I think I would say we probably need more research on this. One of the things is if you've eaten a ton of fish, I still wouldn't say pump and dump your milk. Don't throw away your milk. But the thing is that we just don't know. I think, you know, when you're pregnant, definitely we're not supposed to eat those kinds of seafoods more than once a week, I believe, because of the mercury levels. However, I'm not really sure. I can't really comment. Maybe the doctor can, Dr. Maulik can, Dr. Shah, sorry, can comment, you know, speak more to that. But my understanding is that that in terms of seafood, that seafood is safe to eat. I'm just not sure whether we should be eating lots and lots of seafood in general, whether we're breastfeeding or not, because of the issues of pollution that we're aware of now.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ria, please take over for the next question.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the point here is that whatever is culturally and regionally available and acceptable, those foods which have been taken by generations together, though your ancestor has taken those foods and now you are taking those foods, your genes are adapted to those foods. So according to the region specific or continent specific, whatever the diet has been taken age wise or age old, those diets are usually acceptable in that region because genes are adapted to that. Okay.
Yes,
so it might be possible that seafood might not be good for somebody, it might be good for somebody. So it's all depend upon what you are adapted to and what you are accustomed to eat every day. You should not be doing something new adventurous thing while for these 9 months and later on during breastfeeding also. Ultimately, it's what you are regularly eating. It should be a balanced diet. It should be providing sufficient enough calories. Especially we need 500 extra kilocalories specifically to help your baby, help your body to lactate well. So that's what the aim.
Sorry, sir, your voice is breaking again.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, now you are.
I had actually muted. Did I finish my last sentence and you heard all of that?
No. Oh, your
Yeah.
voice is breaking.
I think my network is not working properly right now. Hello?
Hello, yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, actually it's something problem with the network. These are technical glitches usually you come across whenever the webinar is usually in full flow. The network glitches usually remind you that you are not technologically superior. Okay. So
Yes.
ultimately what I mean to say is that use your traditional wisdom to which you are adapted.
Okay, sir. That was very informative. Priya, please take over.
Okay. Yeah. Let's continue with the questions. So, Miss Annabelle, can you tell us about breastfeeding practices in your region and if there are any harmful cultural practices?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny because I work in the UK. I've worked in France, the UK, and now I'm working for the Americans in the UK. So I'm working for the United States Air Force as a contractor, and I'm an IBCLC lactation consultant in a hospital there. So in terms of practices, I mean, you know, in the UK, and I think it's pretty much the same in some parts of the US as well, although I'm not, this isn't a comment obviously on like my workplace, because that's kind of, you know, different, a bit different, because it's, you know, abroad. But you know, in general, I think, you know, one of the things that that interferes greatly with breastfeeding is the cascade of interventions that can happen at birth. And so because of a variety of reasons, but mainly, you know, not sufficient preparation really for birth. I think we don't prepare families very well for breastfeeding, for birth and for after birth. I think, you know, if you have money, you can go to classes and things like that, but, you know, or you can have a doula or whatever, but, you know, otherwise for the majority of people, you know, it's pretty much a lottery. Now you might have really great midwives, you know, midwifery-led team. Here in the UK, we have midwifery-led teams and so on. And that's great, but it's pretty much a lottery. And the birth practices and the cascade of interventions are the issue. You know, so for example, you know, we have issues with, you know, do you know what I mean? Does everybody know what I mean by the cascade of interventions? Right. So, you know, and so this, you know, where we start off, you know, with not moving a lot, or, you know, having a lot of pain relief very early on. And then as a result of that, that then leads to, you know, immobility during birth. And then, you know, as a result, you know, potentially, you know, the birth process slows down, and so the baby, you know, gets into distress, and so, you know, then we go to a C-section or whatever, and that happens quite commonly. I think I don't, all over the world. I mean, I don't think that's a kind of just specifically to the UK, but that's kind of one of the things that I saw in the bigger hospitals when I was working in London. And then really, I mean, just the cultural aspect. So, you know, there's this code on breast marketing, breast milk substitutes, and marketing of nipples and teats and so on, called the WHO code, the WHO code. And this has been in existence for decades, and it's supposed to control the marketing within countries. However, here in the UK, it's not enacted correctly or fully into law. So, you know, we have things like, we have wall-to-wall adverts on TV for follow-on formula milks, that kind of thing. So even they invented a kind of toddler milk, you know, so that they could bypass the rules that had been enacted into law on advertising. So they had all these follow-on milks, these specialist milks, etc., hungry baby milk, etc. And so the ubiquitousness of the marketing, and it's kind of endemic, it's everywhere. And they also pay for training. They try to pay for training for healthcare professionals. we've got rid of, a lot of that in the last few, say 10 or 15 years. We've been able to get rid of some of that advertising to health professionals, but it's still, it's still around a lot. So marketing, harmful, unbridled marketing practices, I think are the greatest issue. And then really the other thing is the prevalence of kind of self-appointed experts on, online, on the internet. So self-appointed experts in breastfeeding who actually give harmful advice and incorrect advice to parents. So parents feel really overwhelmed, and they feel bombarded by both marketing messages and also this kind of almost like a campaign of misinformation. It's a kind of concerted effort of all these kinds of different, they're being pulled in lots of different directions. One of the things that they say most is, parents in feedback to us, in the UK, is that is the inconsistency of advice that they've received. And I can understand that because, do people know what an IBCLC is? So we're an international board certified lactation consultant, and we're supposed to be, the expert in breastfeeding, or we have the highest level of kind of clinical knowledge, right, of lactation and breastfeeding. And yet most people don't even know what we are. I don't know. What were we going to say, doctor? Sorry.
Yeah. Basically, very well taken. We can see three areas of big concern here. Number one reason for lack of breastfeeding continuation and breastfeeding practices is lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge because we do not teach this essential skill. We consider this as just a basic instinct which the girl will automatically start practicing as soon as she becomes mother, which is not possible. We do not teach this at schools. We do not teach this as colleges. We do not teach that or do not discuss it even in public. So usually our lady who becomes mom, that is the first day of newborn also, and that is the first day of mom as mom also. And she is been now expected to serve all the purposes of the newborn, meaning breastfeeding, bathing and everything. How the hell she can be knowing everything? And just on the lighter side, have you seen anybody's matrimonial biodata quoting that she has an experience of raising 2 kids? And if somebody writes such things, will she be able to marry? So ultimately, point is that lack of knowledge because of our own hypocrisies, that we do not teach such an essential thing right within our educational curriculum. Second point is misinformation. That's what you have correctly quoted here, that the companies which are selling the milk substitutes often sponsor and spell the misinformations, and that lead to a lot of advertising enigmas in the population who purchases those dabbas and those milk containers. But fortunately enough, our government, Indian government, has having a very strong law called Infant Milk Substitute Act, which prohibits all advertisement and any fund giving to any academic institute or any doctor in regard to this particular thing. So that is well taken care of by government, thanks to many NGOs and many organizations working so hardly to stop all those things. And the third part is, again, patient or a person who is having such issues with breastfeeding, approaching to whom to approach, they do not know. Because most often what come across in our practice is that people believe that gynecologist has to be seen when there is a complaint below the umbilicus. Surgeons say our role start when the breast is really ill or sick and having abscess. And the poor pediatricians who know something about breastfeeding are never approached at all. So ultimately, it's the three-pronged problem where the breastfeeding basics are usually not known and not performed.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. Annabelle, I have another question for you. do you have any advice for mothers to continue to provide breast milk after returning to work or school?
Absolutely. So, you know, hopefully they will have an employer with whom they'll have started a dialogue during their pregnancy about what the return to work will be like. In a lot of countries, we have protected time and a protected space to express breast milk or to feed the baby. But that's, you know, practice is different internationally. But, you know, that's one of the things that has improved, I think, over the past few decades. So really to start that dialogue as early as possible with your employer. And the other thing really is just to be aware of, you know, the main thing is to express. So whether you express by hand or you use a breast pump or you have your baby come and visit you in your workplace, either way, it, you know, it needs to be every few hours. Every baby is slightly different in terms of so, you know, some babies will need to feed every couple of hours, some will be every 3 hours, some will be every 4 hours. But, you know, whatever it is within that, that is, you know, the frequency that you need to try and keep to at work. Now, I know that in practice, even if you're allowed, you know, say a break every 3 hours, we don't necessarily get that because there's meetings or, you know, something comes up or something like that. And if that's the case, and you know you can't get to your pump or to your room where you're going to be able to pump or, you know, that kind of thing, then one of my hacks is to just disappear to the toilet and, you know, just, you know, I mean, you can take a bottle with you, but, you know, you might not want to, you know, disappear with the bottle and then come back with the bottle if you're trying to be discreet, I suppose. So, you know, if you can only just get a toilet break, but you're feeling really uncomfortable and you need to, you know, you need to empty the breast, then I just suggest, you know, popping it into a sink, you know, because at least even if you lose that milk, it's about maintaining that supply and demand cycle frequently enough, and also not becoming uncomfortable and not becoming, you know, getting something like mastitis or so on. So it's really just, I hope that was clear enough. Yeah. But I mean, you know, in general, it's really just trying to stick to that with your workplace. And, you know, the other thing I think that people worry about a lot is they see on social media, again, it's the internet, they see on social media, you know, people's huge stashes of pumped milk, pumped frozen milk, etc. And you don't need a huge stash when you go back to work. You just need enough for a few days, a few bottles for a few days, or a few cups for a few days. And that's pretty much it. And that, you know, if babies are, and then when you get home, to just always feed the baby directly at the breast when you're at home, or, you know, out and about or whatever. But when you're not at work, to feed the baby at the breast, because that's going to make your life so much simpler. The baby, having been away from you for a long time during the day, say an 8-hour working day, will want to reconnect through breastfeeding a lot during, you know, during the nighttime. And nighttime feeds are important to maintain, depending, you know, obviously depending on how many months you are into your lactation as well. It can be more critical. Obviously, in the first few months, it's really important to maintain the night feeds, you know, the frequency of the night feeds and so on, because of things like your prolactin levels at night, and, you know, your milk at night tends to be richer. But just to say that, you know, if you've been away from your baby, they will want to be at the breast, and it won't necessarily just be for feeding. They'll want to reconnect with you. So.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now we move on to our next question. What foods should be given to the child after 6 months of breastfeeding? Robin, ma'am, would you please answer?
Okay, unmuted myself. This is all great information. So thank you everyone for that. So once we start introducing solid foods, typically moms start with cereals, so rice, oats, barley. But as Dr. Shah said, as Annabelle said, it's what you have access to and what your family is familiar with, what you can afford. But typically, those are the first. It's the cereals, which are typically pretty affordable and easily digestible for the baby. And then whether you purchase it or you do it yourself, again, it's the fruits and vegetables like apples, bananas. Orange foods are super rich in nutrients, so pureed carrots and sweet potatoes. So the same foods that you would be eating while you're breastfeeding, that you would want to nourish the baby and that you have access to and that you can afford, would be equally amazing pureed for the baby, easy to digest, easy to tolerate, and a little sweet. I know that one of the, and Annabelle's probably familiar with this, is some pediatricians will say, don't start with applesauce because the baby will immediately just be drawn to sweet foods. And so when you try green beans, then they shun the green beans. So for me, when I was breastfeeding and introducing my boys to solids, that's what I did. I started with vegetables. I started with, instead of rice, I started with barley and oats. So it seemed to work. I have kids that love vegetables, but that is one thing. But anything the baby that you have access to that you can afford that is part of your regular diet anyway they're all great options.
Thank you, ma'am. Annabelle, ma'am, would you like to comment?
I think Dr. Shah wanted to say something.
Okay. Yes, please.
I'm just always jumping on Annabelle's turn. I think I just wanted, Robin made it very clear, and I just wanted to add upon here that most often we assume that usually we have to use fresh food. Our idea of complementing this particular diet after 6 months of breastfeeding is to bridge that calorie gap, which is now because the baby is growing so fast that he needs that extra calorie and protein. So ultimately, our aim should be to take the baby from breast to the regular diet which family is eating. So ultimately, it's now the creative zone of parenting which comes into play. Say, for example, whatever you have cooked for your routine diet for all the family members can now be served to the baby based upon his requirements. Say, for example, if I give you a common example of Indian household where we make lentil or the dals, and these particular dals are usually used and cooked and served to all in regular eating. Now these boiled lentils can be utilized by mashing them, almost grueling them, and using a semi-liquid form of that particular lentil, and add to that some amount of ghee, or you can add jaggery or sugar to it to make it a little calorie dense. We have to remember that the stomach of these babies are very small. So whatever you are going to feed has to have that extra protein and energy densing, because ultimately you are going to lose that particular chance if you are not feeding them well. So starting them with liquidy kind of things is not a good idea. Usually we ask them to take one particular cereal. For example, if you are taking the Indian breads or roti, what we commonly at households, usually you can be very much attached to wheat with your genes. So here you can start with a porridge and little semi-liquid kind of thing or semi-solid kind of things, and then gradually building on that particular platform, you can go. Ultimately, it's a creative zone of parenting which every parent should enjoy, without telling every time to the infant that I have made this food for 3 years of 3 hours of preparation, and now you are not eating even 3 spoons of that. So that is everyday job of a mom, and it is going to be always hassling, but it's definitely going to be an enjoyable part of parenting, especially adding complementary feeding.
That sounds great. And I think what I would just add to that is that we always, in the first, up until a year, that it's always good to start with the breast and then offer the food. because the food, you know, particularly like you were saying, the foods that are high in liquid and, you know, even vegetables and fruit, which are great, but if they're, you know, they've got a lot of water content, that's going to displace the breast milk. And breast milk is still, or breast milk, or, you know, the milk that the baby's having is going to be the key component of the diet until at least 1 year old. The food is important, definitely. And so, you know, some you know, La Leche League, for example, for decades have suggested, you know, small bits of meat chopped up, you know, if meat is a thing that you know, you have in your diet, as long as the gag reflex, as long as we've waited until 6 months and the gag reflex is well developed, you know, so small pieces of meat, but also, you know, like you were saying, avocado, which is dense in nutrients. I mean, I'm talking from a Western perspective, so, you know, obviously, you know, diets are different, you know, in each locality, but yeah, you know, whatever the food of your tribe is, basically, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So let's open the floor to the audience to ask us questions. We have one question already on the chat thread. I'm just going to read it out. If a mother stops breastfeeding, will she be able to continue it after a while?
What do they mean by after a while? You mean come back to breastfeeding? Yes, definitely. So if that's what they mean, that if you've got an established, you know, supply, and then suddenly you kind of go, oh, you know, I need to go off on this trip or something. So, you know, your supply is pretty much established around about, you know, regulates around about 4 to 6 weeks, you know, when the baby, you know, postpartum, 4 to 6 weeks. And so then if you suddenly, I don't know, say at 2 months you had to go on a journey or something like that, and you said you suddenly stopped breastfeeding and then you wanted to come back to it, by all means you could relactate, you know, that happens. If you just look up relactation, there's lots and lots of resources online about that. So even if your specific case doesn't fall into those criteria, you know, maybe your supply wasn't 4 to 6 weeks, I don't know, or maybe it was later on, it's perfectly possible to relactate. And some people lactate even if they haven't given birth, and that's a whole other kettle of fish.
But okay, there's one more question. When should a mother start giving water to her child?
Short answer, after 6 months.
6 months. So the first 6 months are exclusively just, baby should just be given breast milk. Are there any other questions? Oh, I got a question on my private chat. How to tell if the baby is getting enough milk?
Okay, shall I answer?
Did you want to answer, Dr. Shah? Or?
Yeah, okay, I'll answer it. See, there are 2 ways where you can see this particular thing. One is the subjective findings, like you can ask the mom that after a feeding, how much time do babies rest well or sleep well? Usually 2 to 3 hours they sleep well post feeding, and how many times they pass urine on stool. So you can reassure the mom first that all this urine and stool is ultimately coming from whatever she has supplied. So it's not enough is not right. Second thing, you can always show that your baby was born with the weight of so and so, and now after so many days the baby is doing well with so much of weight. So if there is a weight increase and similarly there is a height increase or the length increase, so those are the parameters which you can show them and measure and show them that this growth wouldn't have been possible if you would not have enough milk. So ultimately both the parts, subjective findings that the baby is finding the life easy and the baby is doing well by sleeping and resting and peacefully passing up and growing. So those are the points which can make a mom satisfy that her milk is enough. It's the problem that our common belief is that every time a baby cries, either the baby is hungry or he or she is having some stomachache. These are the common public belief which makes them think that the baby is hungry because I am not having enough milk. But I would like to reassure all those moms that there are at least 30 reasons for knowing that the baby is crying. Baby might be pinched by something, baby might be beaten by something, baby might not have a good dream of, or she is not liking the clothes of yours, or she is not having the good smell of the things around. So there are plenty reasons to cry for them, and they have only one language to express themselves, and that is cry, cry, and cry. So do not believe that every cry is for hunger, and do not make or feel bad for yourself that you are not having enough milk and that's leading to cry.
But you see, it's funny because both those things that you raised, kind of perceived belief that you don't have enough milk or perceived belief that the baby has a stomach ache, those both emanate directly from the marketing, you know, because the marketing, they sell us something to get, you know, gas drops or whatever, or, you know, they sell us the formula for the hungry baby, right? So
Absolutely. It's often seen that every time, it's very funny, but I would like to say that every 4 to 6 weeks of age, babies usually develop something called infantile colic. So these babies will start up crying at around evening hours of 6 or 8 p.m. and they will keep on crying without any being able to reassure them, or we might not be able to calm them up. So in that situation, believe me that none of the person in the society would like to see a child crying. So that is a human tendency. So often we end up giving our own advices, even those are not scientific. The commonest advice is you feed them other animals' milk or an infant formula to feed this particular child. And then it becomes a vicious cycle that baby thinks now that it is so easy to get milk. Let's cry a bit. Let's
right.
cry a bit.
But, you know, just to, in practical terms, you know, what we can say, and, you know, I'm going to follow on what Dr. Shah was saying, was that, you know, basically beyond the first few days of life, you know, which are slightly different, but, you know, beyond, you know, day 3, 4, once your mature milk comes in, you know, the bigger volume milk, basically we're looking for about 2 stools at least, and most breastfed babies until about 4 weeks will produce at least two poos, you know, two poos about the size of a, you know, well, in England we say a 50p coin, but I don't know what coin that would correspond to where you are, but, you know, be about that size. And about 6 heavy wet nappies in 24 hours. And a heavy wet nappy is about 2 tablespoonfuls of water. So if you can remember that, if nothing else, you know, that's kind of how we know. But obviously, you know, the weight gain is important as well. That's the other aspect, and the baby's meeting its developmental milestones.
Okay. I got another question on the chat. Do you think the worry of not producing enough breast milk adds to the pressure of postpartum depression?
Who's this for?
Anyone can take it. It's
Robin,
from the audience. It's from the audience. This question is from the audience.
Okay. So ultimately, see, it's a vicious cycle. The mother is the most emotionally labile animal when she delivers. So whenever you disturb the emotions are straightly related to the baby. Every mother wants the best child, and every mother wants the best technique to grow this child, the world's most beautiful and most strong baby. So every time they are desperate to produce something or other which is wonderful to the baby. Now in that area, if you put up a negative emotional remark to this particular female that you are not producing enough milk, this is going to produce a very negative vicious cycle, because these emotions, when affecting the amygdaloid, usually the emotional centers, they tend to have the pathways related to posterior pituitaries also, and that depresses. I think Annabelle can explain the pathophysiology of those emotions and other things. But ultimately, when these negative emotions take their toll, this particular mother might not be now having that hormonal drive as good as enough before. Now she might be really not secreting just because you bombarded her with negative remarks, which led to the suppression of the hormonal drive because of the negative emotions, anxiety, fear, pain, everything. So please, please, please talk very much with a calm and comforting voice to any mother, especially making negative remarks regarding anything. So mothers are liable to negative emotions. Please do not make any remarks in that tone or voice.
So, you know, pregnancy and postpartum are definitely sensitive periods, you know, psychologically for parents, for both parents, in fact, not just the mother, but the mother perhaps more substantially because of the significant hormonal changes and body changes. But I think definitely the cortisol. So, you know, what we know about breastfeeding, you know, we have breastfeeding in war zones or, you know, countries where there's, you know, mothers are under constant stress. So cortisol is will inhibit a letdown, your letdown of, you know, the hormone, you know, it will slow down the process of milk ejection, but it won't actually diminish your supply. So, you know, this is a common belief that is kind of preyed upon again. Sorry, I keep coming back to the formula companies, but, you know, what they'll do is they'll say, oh, well, you know, they'll say that, you know, in this particular war or something, you know, then, you know, we need to give all this formula out because, you know, you won't be able to breastfeed. That's not true. You know, of course, people will be able to breastfeed during you know, during stressful times. It's just that you know, the ejection reflex will be slowed down. And so, you know, it will look like the supply has decreased. So you can get into a kind of cycle, you know, as Dr. Shah was saying, and that can lead to depression. And definitely, you know, I think for some families, if they have the choice, then, you know, maybe breastfeeding isn't always best. You know, people say, I don't like that phrase, you know, breast is best, etc., etc. I think for some women, it might not, you know, it's all about the parents and what they feel is possible for them. But I think, you know, the key is having, you know, timely and accurate information in order to be able to make choices about feeding their baby. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah. There's another question from Neha. I've heard from many elders giving advice to lactating mothers that they shouldn't intake nuts or nutty foods. Does it affect the child? Robin,
did you want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what we've been saying, what Dr. Shah said, is that if it's part of your family's diet and it's what the family is eating, and nuts are super nutritious. I mean, they have all the vitamins and minerals and fiber that the mother needs. She needs those extra 500 calories per day. So if that's something that the mom can tolerate, then that is, I feel that that's something that can be incorporated into a healthy diet for a breastfeeding mom. Some foods are not tolerated well. Suddenly, something that you could eat all during pregnancy, the mom has a problem digesting post-pregnancy. Something that happens, and it can go away after a few weeks or months. So I think this is like, you know, an individual situation. If it's something that's readily available and tolerated by the mom, and you see the reaction, and I'll say too, sometimes you watch your children after, and if you see something's making them gassy, if you have had a lot of a certain food and then you see a different reaction in the baby, then that's something. I used to keep a little journal. I recommend that people keep little journals if to see if you're introducing new foods that you're eating and it ends up in the breast milk, to see if you see a difference in the child. It's just always good to keep that journal. So that's my advice, is to incorporate all foods that you would normally have in a healthy diet.
I think I would like to add here. Actually, the belief of mom eating something and that affecting the baby has came from the old ancient science, where people used to believe that a certain family runs certain particular allergies in the family, and this family these allergies are related to certain antigen or a protein molecule. Now, if a peanut is allergic to particular family members, they consider that this might affect the incoming baby also. And when you are exposing the baby with that particular antigen or a higher protein molecule, this baby will have allergy march, what we call the progression of the allergy in the body will be faster. So they used to believe that mom will have been taking this particular antigen and the baby is getting exposed via breast milk. They might be sensitized quite earlier and they will develop allergy in the later period of life compared to they will be developing allergy earlier compared to they might not be when they are not exposed to such antigen. But unfortunately, we do not have such evidence right now to prove that these things are being transmitted via breast milk. So that was then old ancient belief, but right now on the evidence-based levels, we do not have any support to prove it.
Yeah, and I'd second that. You know, we make, breast milk is made from the blood. So, you know, at that level, you know, we would just be talking, and, you know, at a molecular level as well. You know, like we were saying earlier on, there are very few medications that are contraindicated. It's about, you know, what goes through at a molecular level. It's actually, you know, it's pretty straightforward. And so, yeah, I'd kind of concur with Dr. Shah there.
Okay.
Okay, so now moving on to our last question. It's from the audience. It is it important to ensure that the baby burps for post-feeding, and why? Dr. Shah, can you answer?
Yeah, often the most important part in a breastfeeding is a proper technique. There are two parts of it: positioning the baby and latching of the baby. If those techniques are incorrect, often the babies tend to gulp a little bit of air, and it has been a tradition to pull out that air by burping so that the babies feel good. And secondly, often if you put the baby stand or erect a little bit on your shoulder or anywhere else, then ultimately it tends to help in settling down of milk and reducing the GER, usually the gastroesophageal reflux also. So that helps out in better digestion of this particular milk. And that's how the burping usually help. And babies feel good soothing with that and they sleep often.
And what I would add to that is that some babies, surprisingly, don't need burping. So it's very, there's a very kind of broad variety, isn't there, of babies?
Absolutely. Just like they are very in different kind of spectrum zone, that some babies satisfy with 10 minutes of breastfeeding, others tend to push on for 30 minutes. So this is baby to baby individualized, and mom will know the best.
Yeah, mum's the expert.
Very true. So now we move on to Khushi Desai. Please take over. Khushi, you're muted. Can you please unmute?
Yeah, okay. Am I audible now, Savi?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, great. Hello, everyone. I'm Khushi Desai, and I'm the co-lead of the maternal health team under the women's health team of Students Against COVID. Unlatching Breastfeeding Basics was a week-long campaign undertaken as our very first project towards improved maternal health care. The primary aim of this campaign was to learn about the perils of a mother regardless of boundaries, to understand and absorb the ideas of different cultures and work out a common strategy useful to all new mothers. The team having been formed just 2 weeks back, we had very little time in our hands to execute this campaign, but we were determined for the World Breastfeeding Week was too big an opportunity to give up on. I am extremely grateful to our esteemed panelists, Miss Robin, Miss Annabelle, and Dr. Maulik sir, for being so supportive and kind, for not only encouraging us as students in our initiatives, but also guiding us for the same. The knowledge we gained today from you was invaluable. Thank you. This campaign would not have been possible without the constant support and encouragement from our women's health team leads, Kushman, especially Kushman, because she was so supportive while collaborating and coordinating with other organizations as well, Reza and Akatya. Thank you for bearing with us and helping us execute our plans with such efficiency, despite the multiple last-minute changes. Special thanks to Lee, the lead of social media team and global health team, for being so enthusiastic and helping us at each step. Ikshita and the infographics and design team, and Sanskriti and the entire broadcast team, none of this would have been possible without you guys constantly toiling to make sure that each activity was executed on time. I can only wonder how many sleepless nights you guys spent after this. Uh, in addition, of course, I would like to applaud Mitali, my co-lead for the maternal health team, the backbone of this campaign, so to speak, adeptly juggling between all the arrangements. And of course, a huge shout out to the PNC team, the PNC sub-team, Savi, Baraka, Ria, and Vihangi, who put in such amazing efforts in researching and compiling the data and ideas for the entire campaign. I feel immense pride in having had such a wonderful team to work with. Before I conclude this meeting, I would like to open the floor for anyone who wishes to share their feedback or views on breastfeeding with us. We'll then move on for a group photo and conclude the meeting. Anybody? Okay. Mitali, do we have you here?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So shall we move on to the group photo then?
Fine.
I request the entire team, all the audience, all the wonderful audience who has been with us today, to kindly switch on the video.
If it's possible for you guys. Please.
Thank God everyone is awake.
The time difference was a big challenge for us, but I'm very thankful to everyone who took out time and joined us today. Okay, so do we have our leads? Do we have the maternal health team? Sanskriti, Ikshita? Mitali?
Yeah.
Would you do the honors?
Done. Got it. Anything you would like to say, Miss Robin, Miss Annabelle, and Dr. Shah? Anything? Any feedbacks for us? Anything would be welcome.
I just want to say, oh, sorry, go on, Robin.
Well, I was just going to say thank you for including me in this, because I think this is so important. And when I first got the request, I thought this is something that that needs to be discussed. I think in the U.S. it's really not discussed as much as it used to be. Maybe it's our busy lifestyles, but I'm glad that a group of young professionals are putting it back in the forefront. It's incredibly important, and it's encouraging for me. So I was honored to be here.
Equally, I felt very honored to be here, and I've really enjoyed my time. I hope you'll have me back in the future. But what I was going to say was I was really impressed as well with Students Against COVID. I mean, absolutely wonderful organization, and all the different, the breadth of the things that you're doing is absolutely fabulous. So, doubly kind of honored to be associated with you. So thank you very, very much.
I think I second Annabelle, what Annabelle and Robin has just said, and congratulations to all of you guys for making such activities. We're very happy to be on panel and discussing all these things with you. Good night to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.
Okay, bye-bye. See
Okay,
you all.
bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, Annabelle. Bye, Robin.
Bye, Dr.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.